Hi guys, in this video I'm going to talk about all the mistakes I made when building my first square drop trailer. Luckily for me I was able to fix all those mistakes along the way, but if you can avoid making them in the first place, it can save you a lot of time and money. So let's get into it. So first off, I'd like to talk about how to avoid having issues with your axle and wheel system, which is the most important part of your trailer. One of the biggest mistakes I made when building this trailer is that I reused an old second-hand axle, wheels and hubs system, and that led to a lot of issues further on. First issue with that was that the axle and suspension springs that I reused from the old trailer were not spec'd enough for the weight of the trailer that I was building, so they were too weak and too flimsy. Eventually I had to replace those. Second issue is that the hubs that came with that kit that I reused were not correct hubs for that kit. One of the other issues, which is partially my mistake, is that I built the original frame as per the second-hand trailer frame specifications, and the wheels on that trailer were too close to the inside walls. That led eventually to having a big issue on our first camping trip, where the wheels ended up getting pushed closer and closer in, and the tire on the wheel started rubbing against the wall and getting worn out until it eventually completely ripped apart, and I ended up with a hub without any rubber on it whatsoever. This is what happens when you use old trailers, suspension and axle kit. So when you build your teardrop or square drop trailer, always make sure that you calculate to leave enough room between your assembled tires and wheels and the inside wall of the trailer. At the moment, after I fixed everything up, I left about at least 30 millimeters space in between. Second issue is when you're welding your hangers in, you have to compensate for the movement of the springs. If you're using slipper springs like me, you have to cater for the backwards movement of the spring. So the wheel, when suspension is working, will be moving slightly to the rear of the trailer. So you have to make sure when you're positioning your hubs to cater for that movement. Another thing is make sure that you use springs that are correctly spec'd for the weight of the trailer that you're building. So if you're building a trailer that's going to be, say, 1 ton in weight, make sure that your slipper spring are rated slightly above that, maybe 20% above. So after that painful incident on the road with the trailer and the wheel, I realized that I have to replace the whole axle kit, new hubs, new wheels, and that's what I ended up doing. I purchased straight from the shop a really good quality kit that was designed to support my trailer weight. It was a lot more heavy duty, and ultimately it was a lot easier to install and set up as well. While I was doing that, I also decided to install the hubs with brakes, so that my trailer has brakes, and you can see that in one of my other videos as well. The new kit was basically incomparable to the second-hand one I used. So that was one of my biggest learnings. Never use second-hand, dodgy old axle and wheel kits. Just go for the new and make sure that that part of the trailer is solid and hasn't got any issues. So this wasn't so much of a mistake as a learning, but originally I had very basic coupling installed here, and since then I've learned it's much better to use this more specialized ball override coupling with vertical movement. So this allows trailer to rotate along a vertical axis, and it won't easily slip off the tow bar. Another issue that I had when building the hatch door for this trailer is that I didn't use long enough L brackets when installing the struts. So what ended up happening is, as you will see on one of my other videos, is that the hatch door is too low and I have to bend down to get in, which is quite inconvenient. Since then I've installed a much larger L brackets, which lifts the door higher up and allows me to stand more freely when accessing the kitchen. As you can see, I've set up the solar charging system on my square drop trailer, which is really handy. However, the mistake I made is that I've installed these after I've already installed the roof racks. So what I had to do is I ended up having to move the roof racks which were already installed to be able to fit the solar panel between the roof rack and the hatch window over there. So I highly recommend that you plan this up front rather than installing it afterwards. Another thing that I didn't really think about up front as much is the sideways weight distribution of the trailer. For example, if you're installing a door just on one side and an awning, that will obviously add more weight on that side of the trailer. What I ended up doing initially was installing the battery on the left hand side of this compartment. So basically I had the awning, I had the door on that side, and I had a heavy battery, so my trailer would slightly sag to the left hand side. Since then I've moved my battery to the center of the trailer, as you can see, so that the weight distribution is a lot more even and the trailer is a lot more balanced. If you watched one of my other videos, you would have noticed that I kept the icebox container inside this kitchen hatch compartment. But after we went camping a couple of times, we realized that this isn't really convenient, because ultimately you want to keep this area free and keep it as a usable kitchen space. So what I ended up doing is installing the fridge inside the front toolbox, which is a lot more convenient. You don't really use the fridge all the time, and when you need to use it, you just walk to the front, open it up, grab what you need, and then you have all this free usable space for cooking. If you end up installing fridge inside the toolbox, make sure that you insulate your toolbox to protect it from a hot sun. I would highly recommend using a good quality, reputable brand fridge if you're installing it inside a toolbox. So whilst talking about the free usable space in this kitchen, you will see that there's a lot of room here, because what I ended up doing is installing the stove inside this compartment that you can open up and close. Now the stove is not permanently fixed, so I can easily take it out and put it back in when I need to take the bottle out, regas it or whatever. But when we need to use it for working area, I can just close it and you have all this space here. When it comes to access to the inside compartment of your square drop trailer, I think if you can afford, having two doors, one on each side, is very handy. I've only installed one and it's been okay, but I can see that it would be quite handy to have one on the other side as well. If you're using some sort of decorative panels to layer the exterior of your trailer, like composite aluminium or anything like that, I would highly recommend that you use a glue that you can brush evenly everywhere, rather than using the S-stroke approach that I did. My approach is okay, and it still holds most of the aluminium okay, but there are a couple of spots where aluminium is slightly delaminating from the wood, and that's fixable as well. But if you can get it done correctly in the first place, it will save you a lot of time and trouble. Another issue that I experienced was related to the air fan. I originally bought air fan from eBay, and it was quite cheap. It was about $150. It wasn't a popular brand though. So what happened is that after I installed it, which by the way was another mistake, I should have tested it before installing it. After I installed it, I found out that the fan wasn't working. So I had to return it and get a refund for it. In the end, I ended up buying a reputable brand, Dometic air fan. It costed me over $300, maybe around $350, but it was worth it because I haven't had any issues with it. If you watched one of my other videos, you may remember that I've installed a bench at the back of the inside compartment that you can pull down and sit on it. Well, after we went camping, we never used that effectively, so I realized that was a waste of time. I realized that all you really need inside the sleeping compartment is just a mattress, some storage area, some storage space, and basically you only use that for sleeping. So even if you want to watch a movie or something like that, you can still sit on the mattress, lean on the back wall and use the area like that. You don't really need that bench. That just added extra weight to the trailer, and it was not necessary, so I had it removed since then. I've used laminated flooring for caravans inside this compartment. However, I've realized that most of this floor is covered by your mattress anyway, and this flooring is quite heavy, Even inside this small space, it adds up to around 35 kilos. So I think much better option is to just use either vinyl flooring or carpet. It's a lot lighter and it will reduce your overall trailer weight. Another learning from building the interior is the lights. I ended up installing 4 downlights in the main cabin and 2 more inside this storage compartment. What I've learned is that you don't need that many lights inside such a small space. 2 downlights would have been sufficient for this area. Another mistake I made was that I didn't plan ahead to install tow bar coupling at the back of this trailer. I always envisaged that at some point I might want to connect the bicycle rack to this trailer, but I didn't plan for it up front. And unfortunately, after I finished everything and installed this water tank, there was not enough support on the frame to install the coupling hatch to which I can connect the bicycle rack. So if you want your trailer to support connecting the bike racks, make sure you design for that up front before building the rest of the cabin. After you end up using your trailer for a little while, you'll start noticing that the chains will, as you usually lean them on your A-frame, they'll start scratching the paint off your A-frame. So what I ended up doing is installing some leftover checkered aluminium over the A-frame steel pipes to protect the paint. You can never have too much water storage when going camping, so additional brackets and holders for water drums can come very handy. You would have also noticed that I installed these little handles next to the hatch door locks to allow me to open the door with ease. Another important thing to plan for is your water tank. First of all, in terms of the size, our tank is around 60 liters, but I wouldn't go any less than that. 60 liters is good for a couple of days of camping, but then you need to refill it. So if you can fit a bigger tank, that's even better. But even more importantly is how you position your water tank. First of all, you need to consider the weight distribution with respect to the rest of the trailer. Second of all is the positioning between your cross-member brackets on the frame. So if you're building the frame from scratch, make sure you design it in such a way that will allow you to build adequate bracing and a frame that can hold your water tank. Now originally when I built the water tank and the tap and the sink, I decided to use just a simple bucket for collecting the outlet water. Just keep it simple rather than installing a secondary tank. So we used this bucket a couple of times when we went camping, but I realized that it's a bit of a hassle as you have to keep emptying it. And after that I came up with a much better approach. So instead of using the bucket, I've just installed a standard hose outlet. So you can plug in a standard water hose and then move the hose somewhere away from where you camp and find a spot where you can release all the grey water. That way you don't have to worry about messing up your camp area with the grey water congregating around your trailer. Instead, just use this hose and let it run somewhere away from your campsite. I would highly recommend investing into an electric water pump. It makes things a lot more easier when you go camping. I used to use the manual push pump, but that was just terrible and not very usable. So if you can, buy and install an electric water pump. Another important must-have for your camper trailer is a fire extinguisher. This isn't so much of a learning as much as a personal preference, but I've removed the awning that I installed on the roof racks because we ended up using a freestanding 3x3 meter gazebo when we go camping. We much more prefer gazebo because it comes with mosquito net and it's quite easy to install. It doesn't take much more time to install or assemble than the actual awning that I have for the trailer. However, if I ever want to use the awning on the trailer, I could just put it back on. Now, another positive learning from this project is that if you are aiming to build a very strong trailer, then marine plywood is the right material choice. As you can see, this trailer is very, very strong, and I'm quite happy with that. I did have to compromise slightly on the weight factor, but overall I'm very happy with the final results. In retrospect, I could have probably used just a regular plywood rather than marine ply, which would be cheaper and possibly a little bit lighter as well, especially because I layered my trailer with the external cladding. So if you're layering it with something like composite panels or some sort of aluminium, something like that, then you can get away with just using regular plywood. In terms of overall weight of the trailer, one of the things that I would probably change is when you're building internal cabinetry, use as light as possible materials for that. I ended up using marine ply because I had a lot of leftover ply, so I ended up using that to construct the internal cabinetry, but this wasn't necessary. This did add extra strength and internal bracing, but I could have just ended up using like a melamine or chipboard or something much lighter for internal cabinetry. But ultimately, if you are looking at building a very lightweight trailer, I would highly recommend looking at composite panels, 30-32 mil composite panels like Styromax or something similar like that. They're a lot more expensive, but you will get a very lightweight trailer using those materials. One of the last issues with this trailer for me personally is the overall length and width. Now, I've deliberately built it so that it's as compact and as small as possible, and I'm quite happy about that because I can easily navigate it through narrow spaces. However, if I would build it again, I would make it slightly longer and slightly wider. Maybe even just 10 to 15 centimeters wider and maybe up to half a meter longer. So a little bit more cabin space, and also if you can, provision for extra storage space between the kitchen and your main cabin. We don't have this on this trailer, but if I was building it again, I would definitely leave area in between here where I can have extra storage compartments. And that's it. I hope you found this video useful and handy, and if you subscribe, I really appreciate that. Thank you, and see you next time. Con